Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas, gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is July 21st, 202nd day of the year. 163 days remain to the year's over with. Now, before we start into holidays and observances, I want to talk to you about July 19th. July 19th, 1969. Excuse me, Apollo 11 landed on the moon in spite of the doubts of a lot of people. And 6 hours after they landed, Armstrong and Aldrin walked on the surface of the moon. In fact, according to rumors, their footprints are still there. Well, on that note, holidays and observances, National Be Someone Day, National Lamington Day. That's a tasty tea time treat that originated as an April Fool's Day prank in Australia. Lamingtons are just the chocolatey, coconutly sponge cake you need indulge in. It's National Junk Food Day, Legal Drinking Age Day. Promote responsible choices. Navigate adulthood with a societal threshold for mature decision making and recreational libation. In other words, don't get plastered before you reach that all important date. National Get Out of the Doghouse Day. Let go of your grudges. Make any apologies you have to make in order to get out of the doghouse and repair your relationships with people. Take a monkey to lunch day. Global Hug Your Kids Day. Invite an alien to live with you day. Now, for those who are not familiar with Marty, he lives with us. He's an alien. I'm not sure what planet he's from, but he's your typical gray. No Pet Store Supplies Day. Excuse me, no Pet Store Puppies Day. Usually they come from puppy mills. National Craft for Your Local Shelters Day. Help folks out. Belgium National Day. National Zookeeper Week. Gypsy Feasting, which goes on through the 27th. That is a celebration held in Belgium, for those not familiar with it. Galway International Arts Festival, held in Ireland. And in spite of Rosie O'Donnell's determination to live in Ireland, it's still a great country to visit. Royal Welsh Show, Tour de France, which goes on the 27th. Festival of British Archaeology. They're finding all kinds of things beneath the soil of Great Britain. Big butterfly count. You can monitor environmental vitality by tallying butterflies. That's a simple but many say profound method. Reveals the delicate balance within the ecosystem. National Moth Month. National Parenting Gifted Children's Month. Everybody deserves a massage week. And let me tell you, I'm all for that. Famous people born in the state, Ernest Hemingway and Robin Williams. All right. Let's go and see what is in the news on this Monday morning. Now, the Trump administration has washed its hands of Comey's daughter after what they're calling the absolute mess of Diddy's trial. She failed in 2 major cases, created an absolute mess. She was involved in the Epstein case and the Diddy case and made a mess of both of them. Now, Lorraine Comey was a veteran prosecutor within the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. And one of the cases she screwed up was the racketeering and sex trafficking case against hip-hop mogul Sean Combs, which the jurors found him not guilty of the most serious charges. And the other one was the 2019 prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein, which barely got off the ground before, according to the federal authorities, he killed himself in a jail cell awaiting trial. And there's a lot of coincidences involved in his death. Number one, they just happened to move his cellmate, which left him by himself. Number two, the cameras that should have been monitoring that area just happened to go on the fritz when he killed himself. And the guards who should have been making routine checks happened to be tied up doing something else. Yeah, things happen. And according to a former inmate, there was nothing he could have hung himself from. Another of her past cases was a conviction of Ghislaine Maxwell, the only Epstein associate held liable by either a civil or a criminal court. She's serving 20 years in a federal prison in Florida. She's appealing her case, of course. Combs also received criticism for arguing in court against unsealing some court documents in the Epstein case. And while there are a number of reasons the government might want to keep them out of the public eye, including Maxwell's pending appeal, President Trump and Attorney General Pam Bondi this week announced plans to ask a federal judge to unseal grand jury materials in that case. Well, according to David Gelman, a Philadelphia area attorney, former prosecutor, there's a number of reasons she could have been fired. Job performance. I mean, the Diddy trial was an absolute mess by anybody's standards. She was the head of it. As well as a lot of questions about her other activities. Well, we've got a manhunt underway for an illegal alien who shot an off-duty CBP officer. Got a long rap sheet. Allegedly shot the officer in the face in New York City. But that's okay. I mean, a slap on the wrist, little community service. According to the powers that be in New York, that's severe punishment. Well, Tulsi Gabbard has been revealing historic information about a historic intelligence plot. Even though Hillary Clinton's campaign paid for the beginnings of the Russia hoax targeting Trump, Obama and the entire administration pushed the fact that Trump was a Russian agent using federal dollars. Well, summer mayhem has erupted as teen mobs overwhelming public spaces across America. The California man accused of ramming his car into an LA crowd is a convicted felon out on parole. He injured 36 people, had at least 11 prior criminal cases filed against him. My question is what he was doing driving. Fernando Ramirez, 29, of San Clemente. He's going to face a felony charge of assault with a deadly weapon after Saturday's incident. It was outside the Vermont Hollywood nightclub. Well, there's been a bipartisan bill filed by Senators Fetterman and Kramer. Fetterman is Democrat and Kramer's Republican, who is transactions done in public to be cash. We'll see how that goes. A Delta flight made an emergency landing at LAX after a visible engine fire was caught on video. Aircraft's left engine burst into flames. The emergency landing was relatively safe. It was happened Friday. Delta Flight 446 took off from LAX. Had to come back, make a safe landing at about 2:10 p.m. local time, according to the FAA. Now, let's see. They're saying a lot of toxic proteins build up in your brain when you have issues with REM sleep. That can be a sign of Alzheimer's. Well, WNBA star Kelsey Plum took a swipe at Caitlin Clark, her all-star teammate, over statement t-shirts. She says Clark's the one that got the t-shirt protest started. WNBA All-Stars, including Clark, who was sidelined because of an injury, wore t-shirts that said, "Pay us what you owe us." That shot across the bow of the WNBA came amid tense talks around a new collective bargaining agreement for 2026 and beyond. Well, according to Christy Brinkley, she was at an event when a man walked up and whispered in her ear that her husband was having an affair. The man that did that was a off-duty police officer, and the young lady involved was his daughter, 18 years old. She's 71, just came out with a memoir called Uptown Girl. She also talked about the fact reason she left Billy Joel when another woman was booze. She's been married a number of times. It was her fourth husband, architect Peter Cook, was unfaithful after 8 years of marriage. Says she was at a graduation ceremony in 2006 to give a commencement speech. Man came up to her, the revelation had what she said had the weight of a wrecking ball. He said, your husband's having an affair. And apparently a lot of people knew. He was a cop at the Southampton station. Well, a lot of illegal immigrants, for whatever reason, hang out at the Home Depot parking lot looking for under-the-table work. And the Border Patrol said 5 of the migrants arrested in the raid on Thursday have criminal history, and 3 are convicted felons. There was a Home Depot in Sacramento, California. 11 suspected illegal migrants were arrested. Now, there's been a lot in the media about undocumented immigrants, and we need to get them out of the country. Well, it's no secret I've been having a going with the VA. And I got a letter, or an email rather, from the House Veterans Affairs Committee, and said a lot of the issues that I made them aware of could have been settled by my congresswoman. I need to go see her. Well, my response to that, I went to see her a long time ago. She was a friend. In fact, I helped her get elected. And when I made her aware of my issues, she said, and I quote, "I don't have time for the little problems of disabled veterans. I've got all these undocumented immigrants to take care of." And her senior aide said, look, you're a problem. We're not even going to process any complaints you may have. So you just go off. So that's a great way for a congresswoman to talk to a constituent. Nobody cares because, after all, she's female, she's a Democrat, and she can do no wrong. Well, Stephen Colbert's character is the latest Never Trump Republican to fall. He's Trump's rise rendered the late-night host's decade-long Republican caricature obsolete as CBS pulled the plug on him. CBS is spending over $100 million a year on that show. Colbert rose to fame through Comedy Central's The Daily Show, earning himself his own news parody show on the network, The Colbert Report, in 2005. And from that satirical anchor chair, he posed as a conservative talking head for almost 10 years. Now, woman's husband died in a freak accident with an MRI. I've been set to have a lot of MRIs, and you hear all the stories, but apparently he was wearing some unauthorized jewelry, and it caused an issue. I was told during one of my MRIs that an off-duty police officer went to take his MRI still carrying his weapon, and the MRI machine caused the weapon to go off. Now that would certainly get your attention. Now, the Alaska Airlines had a ground stop for all mainline aircraft, according to the FAA. That has now been lifted. Operations have resumed, according to Alaska Airlines spokesperson. They experienced an IT outage, resulting in a temporary system-wide ground stop for Alaska Airlines and Horizon Air flights. That's according to a spokesperson. Well, Superman director James Gunn has been forced to address the super woke backlash for his movie. He described the Superman character in his film as an immigrant that came from other places and populated the country. That somehow makes him better than those that were actually born there. Vladimir Putin's been warned that President Trump's about to put a whooping on your ass. He was not pleased, of course. Well, a Texas House Democrat got an attaboy from Joe Rogan. He's urging this progressive Texas Democrat to run for president, calls him a good person. That's Texas State Rep James Tallarico once called Greg Abbott the greatest public safety threat to the state. And frankly, Abbott is not one of my favorite people, but still. Arizona's voucher program has cost one school district $20 million as parents flee public schools. Some districts thrive, others face budget cuts. Arizona has an $800 million education freedom initiative that is reshaping the enrollment patterns. Texas Unified School District, based in Tucson, is facing financial and enrollment struggles after universal school choice passed in the state in 2022. About 4,000 students use vouchers to either go to private school or be homeschooled. And I'll be the first to say, I've got 5 degrees. And all of those are 50 cents to get me a cup of coffee. The things that we used to be required to learn are now kicked to the curb. Some things don't need to be learned. I would beg to differ with that. Well, former President Joe Biden suspended his re-election campaign amid pressure from his own party on July 21st, 2024. That ended his more than 50-year career in politics and really shook up the Democratic Party. Days after President Trump accepted a GOP nomination, Biden stepped down. This unprecedented announcement came as an increasing number of Democrat lawmakers started to publicly call for Biden to step aside. And the party leadership undertook a program to convince Biden, who was 81 at the time, he couldn't win 2024 general election against Trump. Well, there's no question he had a cognitive decline. Everybody knew it but him. Well, in Poland, a medieval knight's tomb has been discovered underneath the former ice cream parlor. They found a rare medieval tombstone that showed an armored figure with a sword and a shield. And underneath that tombstone was the complete skeleton. This is in Gdansk, Poland. Historic city that's been known for its colorful architecture and its location on the scenic Wadława River. It was beneath an ice cream parlor. One stood at the intersection of two streets that I cannot pronounce to save my life. According to Fox News, those that discovered it said that area was once a 13th century cemetery next to the remains of Gdansk's oldest known church. The church is built of oak wood cut down in 1140, according to dendrochronological dating. It's currently recognized as the oldest wooden church ever identified in Poland. Tomb, they said, likely belonged to an elite knight, having been made from limestone imported from the Swedish island of Gotland. And the carvings on the tombstone was carefully crafted, suggesting a high-quality artisan produced the tombstone. And despite some damage, the head, the left foot, and a lot of the details of the arm and the weapon are still very clear. Well, 6 people who should have known better were swept over an Oregon waterfall. One's dead and 2 are missing on the Deschutes River west of Bend, Oregon. It's a multi-agency search. The Dillon Falls features a 15-foot drop that turns into churning rapids in a quick step-ladder-like pattern. And there are hazard signs that show waterfall warnings to those traveling on the water. But some folks, warnings for everybody but them. Well, fuzzy seasonal fruits help beat the heat while boosting the heart and the brain, according to experts. Peaches that are about 89% water outshine their stone fruit counterparts like plums and nectarines in terms of hydration, according to the Department of Agriculture. And of course, watermelon and cantaloupe top the charts for highest water content. But peaches are right up there with them. Well, a commercial jet was forced into a aggressive maneuver to avoid a mid-air collision with a B-52 bomber. The commercial jet was carrying passengers from Minneapolis to Minot, North Dakota. It was a SkyWest Airlines flight. And a lot of the passengers were aware of the near collision. The, okay, we got anything else? World experts are saying King Charles is a little hesitant about Prince Harry's peace offering. And finally, CBS staffers are calling Stephen Colbert's cancellation a chilling of free speech. Anything left should be allowed to go on, according to them. Anything conservative? We don't need that. Okay. Well, anything that we've talked about in our last few shows has been about secret U.S. government programs. But do you know there's been a lot of hidden activities by the governments of other countries? Oh yes, it will absolutely blow your mind, some of the things that have gone on. I was doing some research and I discovered that there have been a lot of behind the scenes activities that nobody wanted anybody to know about, especially when we talk about the country of Israel. Now, the one that I found the most fascinating is when it was discovered at the end of World War II, which of course was a time of great confusion and chaos. They found out that they had a Nazi SS officer serving as an Israeli army captain. Now, you might say that's absolutely impossible because everybody knew who all the Nazis were. Simon Wiesenthal, of course, has been chasing them around the world. And you might think the story's too incredible to be true. Maybe it was the plot of a movie. But in actuality, it's completely factual. Former Nazi SS officer came to Israel, posing as a Holocaust survivor, enlisted in the Israeli army, and became a commissioned officer. The only reason he left Israel was due to a romantic entanglement that put him in a position where he thought his only out, if you will, was to start providing information to Egyptian intelligence in return for cash payments. In fact, Israeli security services sent one of their top agents to Europe to entice the men to come back to Israel. They ran an operation where they convinced him that Israel's top agent was actually a double agent working for Egypt. They wanted to get him back so they could arrest him and put him on trial. Now, the extraordinary story the decision was made to invest major operational efforts into luring this guy, his name was Ulrich Schnaff, back to Israel from Germany. Israeli intelligence planners had in mind a scenario of a criminal returning to the scene of the crime to commit an even greater offense, with a Middle Eastern twist, of course. And what What makes this particular case so bizarre? It's hard to determine if it was driven more by human wickedness or by the sheer unpredictability of life. Now, the facts are very simple. Ulrich Snaff was a Nazi SS member who came to Israel, joined the IDF, and by all accounts, he was an outstanding soldier. Completed officer training, served as a lieutenant in the artillery corps, worked on the kibbutz, got entangled in an affair, left the country, and voluntarily provided Egyptian intelligence in Cairo with classified information about Israel and the IDF. Now, Ulrich Julius Snaff, S-C-H-N-A-F-T, was born in 1923 in Königsberg, Germany. He was born out of wedlock, what's normally referred to as illegitimate. As an infant, he was adopted by a German couple, Amelie and Edward Mueller. His original surname was Klein. But in 1940, Germany, you do not have last names that sound even remotely Jewish. 1941, immediately after completing trade school, he was conscripted into the German army, along with a lot of other folks his age. And as a member of an SS unit, he was sent to the Russian front. And during his service there, he was wounded in the hand and the head on several occasions. And these injuries, of course, allowed him to be sent back home to Germany. Now, after a brief time in Germany, due to the need for soldiers of his caliber, he was deployed to Yugoslavia. And from there, he went to the Italian front. In the Battle of the River Po, he was captured by the Americans and spent nearly 3 years as a POW. It wasn't until June of 1947 he was released from the POW camp, went back to Germany, settled in Munich. And in Munich, he shared a room with a Jewish man by the name of Leo Hirschberg. Now, of course, in 1947, Germany was in ruins, and the country divided between the occupying Allied armies, and the economic situation, of course, was dire. Ulrich was a native German child born in shame who had demonstrated notable survival instincts, and he discovered a lot of Jewish organizations, including the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, were providing food packages and financial support to Jewish displaced persons. So after thinking about it, he came up with a very, some would say, brilliant idea. He became Jewish. He declared he was the product of a mixed marriage, and his father was a Jew by the name of Julius Siss, S-I-S-S. Well, from that time on, since a lot of records had been destroyed in the debacle at the end of the war, he was also included on the list of aid recipients. Well, that decision was a major one. With the future in Germany looking bleak, unemployed Ulrich decided to leave Germany. Opportunity presented itself, and emissaries from the Mossad, the Bet, an organization that facilitated illegal Jewish immigration to Palestine, organized a group of immigrants to head to the Holy Land. And now Ulrich later said he planned to stay a short time in Israel before immigrating to Canada or any place else. October 1st, 1947, he left Germany with the group bound for Marseille. And in the French port city, he stayed in the transit camp. The name Ulrich Snaff, with its German pronunciation, caused him no end of trouble, so he changed it. In those days, it was very simple to change your name. He became Gabriel Sisman. December 1947, he set sail from Marseille toward Palestine on board the refugee ship Haggadah. But unfortunately, the ship was seized by the British in the middle of the ocean and its passengers imprisoned in internment camps in Cyprus. Now, Snaff was 24 years old, had combat experience he hadn't told anybody about. So he joined the Haganah branch that formed in Cyprus for reasons you can only speculate about, and even took part in 2 escape attempts. It's been about a year after leaving Marseille, Snaft and other Haganah ship passengers finally reached the port of Haifa. Well, due to circumstances, ended up on a kibbutz kiryat Anavim. Worked on the kibbutz and learned Hebrew. That was the standard routine for thousands of other young immigrant men like him. And just as naturally, because of his military background, he enlisted in the IDF in August of 1949. Went through a short but grueling basic training. That's in keeping with the traditions of the British military that at that point in time dominated the IDF. For those that are not familiar with the initials IDF, that's Israeli Defense Force. And because he showed promise, he was sent to squad commander school and completed that successfully. And at this stage, he declared that he wanted to join a settlement and he was discharged from military service. Well, until 1950, Gabriel Sisman, as he became known, was a member of the Mossad near Ascalon. But he still kept his ties with the IDF, first worked for the Army as a civilian instructor and later conscripted into military service again. Completed officer training, attained the rank of lieutenant in the Artillery Corps, and went through a number of additional military courses. 1952, applied to be accepted into the career Army. But at this point in time, a previously unknown factor emerged. IDF security officials came up with some details and made him suspect he was concealing his true identity. Among other issues, he was said to have made a strange drunken comment to this effect, even showed people photos of himself in an SS uniform while he was drunk. Now, of course, these suspicions didn't amount to proof, but it was enough to disqualify his application for career military service. Well, after his hopes of military career were dashed, he moved in with friends in Ascalon, formed a close relationship with the wife, and likely began a clandestine affair with her, of the couple he moved in with. The 61-year-old husband discovered his much younger wife was having an affair with a man he'd welcomed into his home and demanded to leave. Well, he did, but the woman went with him. They moved to Haifa together. Well, Eric began planning his return to Germany, this time going back with his secret lover. In the meantime, the chunk-old husband actually went to Germany. In January 1954, apparently following her former husband, the wife went to Germany as well. All the details of this romantic triangle are not entirely clear. What is known is on February 4th, 1954, Gabriel Sisman boarded a ship, the Negma, destined for Italy. Now, according to the plan he had at the time, he was going to land in Genoa, go back to Germany, but an unexpected snag occurred. He now had an Israeli passport and had an unexpected restriction. It was good for all countries except Germany, and that was stamped on the passport. At that point in time, it was the policy of the Interior Ministry that forbid travel to what was seen as the Valley of Death. So the German consulate refused to grant him a visa. He met with the consul, told him his real story, and asked to return to his homeland. But the consul didn't believe his wild story. Of course, he had heard his fair share of difficult post-war stories, but this one was just too wild to be believed. An SS man serving in the IDF? Well, he now found himself in a type of predicament adventure and espionage authors like to write about. It was a actually a critical crossroads moment. Despite having his wings clipped, he remained in Genoa with only $20 in his pocket. So something gave him the idea of going to the Egyptian consulate to sell the secrets he'd acquired in the IDF to the Egyptian military. At least that's the suspicion. There are no clear answers at this point. What is known is that in his consular meeting, he said he was a German officer, been living until then in Israel under a false Jewish identity, and was a former IDF officer. And he made the Egyptian consul a very simple offer. He would provide all the information he had about the IDF in Israel, while Egyptian intelligence would assist him financially and help him get back to Germany. Well, according to best information, the Egyptian consul examined his documents and the photos and everything else he had when he was convinced by the sincerity of this young man. That night, the consul left his post and went with York to Rome, and at the Egyptian embassy introduced him to the military attaché. This official questioned Sisman again and got thorough answers to all his questions. But based on prior experience with the cunning of Israeli intelligence, the attaché took no chances and suggested that the Sisman shall fly to Cairo to be interrogated again. And Ulrich agreed, turned over his Israeli passport to the Egyptians, and got an Egyptian one under the name of Robert Schneider. In Cairo, he was questioned by senior officers for a full month in both German and English about the state of affairs in Israel and the IDF. To the Egyptian officials in Cairo, he seemed like a strange, suspicious character, but after getting precisely detailed answers about the IDF units, their weapons, bases, and training plans, they made a surprising proposal. They proposed he go back to Israel, try to enlist in the career army, get assigned to a base in the south of the country, and pass military intelligence to Egypt from that southern base. He'd be given generous compensation, of course. Well, apparently, he refused that offer, which presumably was more lucrative than an earlier Iraqi one that had been made. Why did he insist on going back to Germany instead of sticking to his original plan of going to Canada? It was believed he wanted to get back with his Israeli lover who was now living in Berlin. What is known is that he asked the Egyptians for time to consider the proposal, but said he preferred to mull it over in Germany. Ultimately, the Egyptians accepted his terms, and in mid-March of 1954, after spending over a month in Cairo, he was given 170,000 Italian lira, flown to Italy, and from there he used his Egyptian passport to go to Germany. Now, in Genoa, he promised the Egyptian consul he'd return the passport if he decided not to accept their mission to Israel. And in exchange, the Egyptians said they'd give him back his Israeli passport and all his belongings once they got their own passport back. So on March 16, 1954, Gabriel Sisman appeared at the home of his lover in Berlin, Egyptian passport in hand. There's no real account of how this reunion went. It's not known if the two went back to living together. What is known is that he made a rare confession to the woman, told her he was pure German, had been in the SS, came to Israel under an assumed identity, and now returned to Germany after a detour to Cairo. Even gave her an address in Frankfurt where he could be reached. Apparently, he also made contact with his adoptive mother, Miss Klein, who ran a hosiery shop there. Well, there's a lot of questions that haven't really been answered. All the details that come out to this point. I also have to wonder how Sisman's chuck-coated husband learned about all this. Well, Be that as it may, whatever the motive and method, the story made its way to Israel in August of 1955. At this point in time, the Shin Bet Security Service held a meeting and decided to lure him back to Israel. In early October 1955, just over a month after the discussion in Israel, contact was made with Shaft in Frankfurt. A connection was established by people acting with discretion and caution to indirectly renew communication with what they referred to as the target, relying on the fact the Egyptian intelligence had promised to reconnect with him. Knowing his financial situation was precarious, they were pretty sure that they could buy him off. In any event, it is known that those operating abroad befriended him and even hinted they had an Arab friend who might be interested in assisting and being assisted by Shaft based on his experience and information. Back in Israel, work began on constructing the persona of that friend who would meet Shaft and tempt him to return to Israel. For this role, a Shin Bet agent was selected who then headed the organization's Arab Infiltration Camouflage Unit. Now, for those who are not familiar with this unit, it was comprised of Jews originally from Arab lands who operated undercover across the armistice lines after the founding of Israel. This was a man who was a veteran of masquerading and identity swapping operations. He began his security career back in Iraq, where he was born as a member of the Jewish underground. Became an operations officer of illegal immigration from Iraq to Israel. And after reaching Israel himself in 1947, leading a 77-member convoy that made the entire overland trek from Baghdad to Beit Harava on foot, he was sent back to Iraq in March of 1948 to organize and encourage continued immigration. In his regular life, he was a lawyer and Ramat Gan, involved in the early 1950s in a number of audacious operational missions across several Arab capitals. Well, Shin Bet technical staff, who were absolutely brilliant at creating identities, they made sure they covered all the small details. The agent in question got a new identity, Captain Adnan Ben Adnan, an Iraqi military attaché at the embassy in Paris. So on November 3rd, 1955, the agent traveled to Germany, and through someone who was a friend of Shaft's, he met him at a Frankfurt nightclub. Shaft was friendly, but previously hinted in conversation that he refused to go to any other country and was only willing to work in Germany. So they sat and chatted, and the agent invited him to meet him for lunch the next day. He described Shaft as pleasant, easy to befriend, a sense of humor, told a lot of jokes. Well, from this lunch, things moved smoothly ahead. Shaft admitted he'd been a captain in the Israeli Defense Forces, which the agent responded to with amazement. He said, "You must be joking. A German born and bred, a Nazi SS soldier and Jew hater couldn't possibly have been an officer in the Israeli army. Not even in a fantasy." So Shaft took him to his home and showed him his photo albums, where Shaft showed dozens of pictures of him in an IDF uniform in Israel. And as a token of friendship, the agent suggested he give him a couple of pictures. And he began to drop hints about paying him to go back to Israel and spy for the Arabs. Well, at that time, Shaft didn't agree to any concrete arrangements. He had a fear of Israeli intelligence, as well he should have. He kept saying Israel has strong espionage capabilities and he had no desire to tangle with them. The fascinating thing was eventually he brought him around. And this was done on a low budget. So the agent and Shaft didn't travel together. A lot of travel was involved. The agent would buy him tickets. There was no money to buy 2 tickets. Now, at one point during a lunch, the agent saw a friend and his wife come in that he had met in Israel. And the wife and the friend were conversing in Hebrew, which of course Chef spoke. So it was a near thing. The agent kept expecting the friend to greet him with a typical Israeli greeting. Well, finally, the agent convinced Shaft to agree to work as a spy. And gave him a ticket on the Air France plane to Tel Aviv. Now, there was a fear that when he realized he'd been had, Shaft might react violently. So they made sure he was disarmed. He told him going through customs, he'd be searched. And he said, "No, I don't have a gun. I have a tear gas pen." Well, on the flight, he was continually given vermouth. So by the time he landed in Israel, he was drunk. Went through customs, got in a cab, which had been sent to wait for him. He gave the driver the name of a Tel Aviv hotel. And before the cab left the airport for the hotel, 2 of the men got in and arrested him. Well, the question at this point was whether they should prosecute him for coming to spy or for passing information to Egyptian intelligence. And after a lot of debate internally, the decision was made not to try him for espionage, since this was in fact a sting operation. Instead, he got 7 years in prison for revealing military secrets to the enemy. And during that 7 years, he was a model prisoner. Devoted himself to reading the Bible, made an effort not to say too much about his friend, Captain Adnan bin Adnan. And the interrogators, of course, didn't try too hard to go into that part of the story. According to them, Shaft believed for a lot of years, and when he got back to Paris, he'd find the man that recruited him and asked for compensation for his time in prison. One of the prisoners he was serving with was about to be let out and go back to France. He asked him to deliver a message to Adnan at the Iraqi military attaché's office in Paris. But wisely, that particular prisoner didn't want to get involved. Well, Shaft sat in jail for 5 years before he was freed in 1961. Went back to Europe, went back to Paris, but there was no longer an Iraqi embassy in Paris. Ties with France had been severed in the wake of the 1956 Sinai campaign. So he had nobody to look for. Number of Israeli individuals who went to Germany and France made passing attempts to find him, but they never did. They don't even know if he was still alive. But I think it's interesting, in the chaos of World War II, something like this could happen. There was another former SS official that I read about. He became an Israeli tank commander. By all accounts, he was brilliant. Before it was discovered, he was in fact a Nazi SS officer. And, when your country's been destroyed, it's not hard to consider that you might do anything to survive, to include serving with someone you grew up thinking was an enemy, just in order to put a meal on the table. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk about more bizarre stories. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great